The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, washing the hospital hallway in a sickly green glow. Rain hammered the windows like an impatient drumbeat. I was buttoning my coat, ready to head home, when a young nurse brushed past me. Her hand slipped a folded card into my palm so discreetly it almost felt like an accident. Her lips barely moved, but her whisper cut through the hum of the corridor. "Don't go back to that house. Run." My heart jolted. Run? From who? From what? I opened my mouth to ask, but she was already gone, vanishing into the sterile glow of the ER like a ghost. That night, with the storm raging outside and the words still burning in my ears, I discovered the truth. The family I had loved, sacrificed for, and trusted with my life, was planning to destroy me. Asterisk, asterisk, if you've ever felt dismissed, betrayed, or made to feel invisible, or maybe you've experienced the deepest loneliness, or that unbearable pain of losing those you love most, share it. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe, because maybe the next story will remind you of your own strength. Asterisk, asterisk, my name is Evelyn Hart. I'm 68 years old, a retired history teacher from Charleston, South Carolina. For most of my life, I believed in the power of sacrifice, of love, of building a home where family would always come first. I wasn't born into wealth or privilege. My late husband Thomas and I built our life one long day at a time. He worked at the shipyard while I graded papers late into the night. Together, we scrimped and saved, hoping to give our only son, Grant, the kind of future we never had. When Thomas died 10 years ago, the house that once rang with his laughter felt unbearably empty. But I told myself I wasn't alone. I still had Grant, I still had Leela, my daughter-in-law whom I treated like my own child, and of course, I had Madison, my granddaughter, Maddie, my joy, my little shadow. I thought, this is enough. Family is enough. I poured myself into them. Birthdays, graduations, late-night calls when Grant lost a deal or when Maddie needed help. With her essays, I was always there. I gave up trips I wanted to take, friends I slowly stopped seeing, hobbies that faded into dust. Everything I had, I funneled into them, because isn't that what a mother does? Isn't that what love is? Yet, lately, something in their eyes unsettled me. The way Grant's smile never quite reached his eyes anymore. The way Leela's voice sharpened when she asked about bills or insurance. The way Maddie, once so affectionate, now pulled away with a cold politeness that felt rehearsed. I noticed small things. A brochure for a memory care facility left on the kitchen counter, its glossy cover showing an elderly woman smiling vacantly at a nurse. When I asked about it, Leela laughed lightly and said, "Oh, just research for a friend." But her laugh was too quick, her eyes too calculating. At night, as I sat in my rocking chair by the window, the magnolia trees casting long shadows across the porch, I would whisper to myself, "Don't be paranoid, they love you. You're imagining things." And yet, the unease burrowed deeper, like a splinter under skin. Because the truth was, I wanted so desperately to believe I was still their center. I wanted to believe the years of sacrifice still mattered. But a part of me, a quiet voice I tried to silence, kept asking, what if they see me not as family, but as a burden? And that doubt, that single thought, was enough to keep me awake at night, staring into the dark, afraid of what the dawn might reveal. Asterisk, asterisk, it began with whispers, not the gentle kind you overhear between loved ones, sharing secrets of affection, but sharp, clipped tones that dissolved into silence the moment I entered a room. One afternoon, I walked into the living room and caught Grant on the phone. He was standing by the window, his back stiff, his voice low. The moment he saw me, he ended the call far too quickly. "Just business, Mom," he muttered, avoiding my eyes. His tone was casual, but the vein in his temple still pulsed, betraying the tension in his voice. Later that evening, as I went to set the table for dinner, I noticed Lila at the kitchen island, papers official looking, with the county seal were spread across the marble. She jumped when she realized I was there, hurriedly stacking them into a neat pile before tucking them beneath a glossy magazine. "What's that, dear?" I asked, forcing a gentle smile. "Oh, just community work," she replied too quickly, her laugh brittle, rehearsed. Her hands lingered on the pile a moment longer than necessary, as though she feared I might reach for it. And then there was Maddie, my sweet granddaughter, who used to curl up beside me on the porch swing, with her head on my shoulder. That night, when I asked her about her college applications, she looked at me with an icy politeness. "That's handled, Grandma. she said flatly, before retreating upstairs with her phone in hand. No warmth, no laughter, just distance. Dinner. The silence was suffocating. The clink of silverware against china was the only sound that filled the air. Grant barely spoke. Leela's replies were reduced to monosyllables. Maddie avoided my gaze entirely. Finally, I tried to break the tension. Is something wrong? No, Mom. Everything's fine, Grant answered too quickly, his fork scraping against the plate as if he wanted to end the conversation. But nothing felt fine. The house, once alive with chatter and the smell of Sunday roasts, now felt like a stage where everyone wore masks, smiles that didn't reach their eyes, conversations that ended when I entered, papers hidden, phone calls silenced. That night, as I lay in bed, I could still see Leela's fingers trembling slightly as she hid the documents. I could still hear the abrupt tone in Grant's voice, and Maddie's eyes cold, practiced, unfamiliar. Me, most of all, the walls of my own home, once my sanctuary, now felt like they were closing in. Shadows stretched long across the ceiling, and every creak of the old house made me sit up, listening, waiting. Don't be paranoid, I told myself again. You're imagining things. But deep inside, a seed of dread was sprouting roots, because if my family wasn't hiding love, they were hiding something far more dangerous. Tuesday mornings at St. Bartholomew's Hospital had always been routine for me. Blood pressure checks, quick lab work, a smile from Dr. Mateo Ruiz, who had cared for me for over 2 decades. He had seen me through the grief of losing my husband, through every flu season, through the milestones of growing older. He was steady, dependable, and always calm. But that morning, something in him was off. His hands trembled slightly as he wrapped the cuff around my arm. I tried to make light of it. Rough night, Dr. Rad joked softly. He gave me a quick smile, but it was tight, strained. Just a busy week, he murmured. His eyes darted toward the closed door, as if making sure no one was listening. When he checked my heart, the stethoscope was cold, but his voice was colder. Everything looks perfect, Evelyn. Your heart is strong, your lungs are clear, you're in remarkable health for your age. He should have smiled at that. He should have celebrated the news with me, as he always did. Instead, he pressed his lips together, his jaw tightening. Then why do you look so worried? I asked, searching his face. He hesitated, then leaned closer, lowering his voice to almost a whisper. Because not everyone wants you healthy. I froze, the words settling like ice in my veins. What do you mean? Before I could push further, he straightened abruptly, the professional mask snapping back into place. Take good care of yourself, Mrs. Hart, he said, forcing a smile that never touched his eyes. And remember, family isn't always what it seems. I blinked at him, stunned. Dr. Ruiz, what are you trying to tell me? But he had already turned to his desk, scribbling notes, pretending the conversation had never happened. His hands shook as he signed the paperwork. I left the office unsettled, clutching my purse a little too tightly. As I walked down the sterile hallway, every fluorescent light above seemed harsher, every echo of footsteps sharper. In the cab ride home, his words looped over and over in my mind. Not everyone wants you healthy. Family isn't always what it seems. I wanted to believe he was being overdramatic, that stress had gotten the better of him. But deep down, I knew Mateo Ruiz was not a man given to careless words. If he risked saying something like that, it meant danger was already at my doorstep. And yet, when I arrived home, the sight that greeted me was worse than any warning. Grant, Lila, and Maddie were huddled together in the living room, whispering, in low tones. The moment I walked in, silence crashed over them. Lila shoved a folder behind her back. Grant looked up, his smile thin, unnatural. How was your appointment, Mom? The dread in my chest tightened like a fist, because for the first time, I began to wonder if the doctor's warning hadn't come too late. That night, the house felt heavier than usual. The creak of the floorboards under my slippers sounded like cannon fire in the silence. I retreated to my bedroom early, claiming I was tired, though in truth, I couldn't bear another moment of their eyes on me, watchful, calculating, as if measuring my every breath. I locked the door softly and sat at my vanity, the lamplight casting a golden circle against the dark. My hands trembled as I reached into my purse. There it was, the folded piece of paper the nurse had slipped to me, edges worn from being clenched in my palm all day. For a long moment, I just stared at it. My pulse thudded in my ears. Part of me wanted to burn it without ever reading it, to cling to the illusion that my unease was nothing but paranoia. But another part, the braver part, whispered, "You already know the truth. Now face it." I unfolded the note with care, as though it might shatter in my hands. The handwriting was hurried, slanted, unmistakably Dr. Ruiz's. "Mrs. Hart, your family came to see me yesterday. Leila asked about your mental state, if I could certify that you were showing signs of dementia. They want to have you committed to a nursing home. They also asked about your assets and inheritance. I refused them, but please, don't go home. Run. The words blurred as tears welled in my eyes. A sharp gasp tore from my throat, and I pressed my fist against my mouth to keep from crying out loud. My family, my own blood, the son I had nursed through fever as a child, who clung to me when nightmares woke him in the night. The daughter-in-law I had welcomed into my home with open arms, treating her as my own. The granddaughter whose laughter once filled every empty corner of this house. And yet, here it was, in black and white. Proof, not paranoia, not imagination. They didn't see me as mother, or grandmother, or protector. They saw me as an obstacle, to be removed. A bank account with a beating heart. I closed my eyes, but their faces flooded my mind. Grant's false smile, Lila's trembling hands hiding papers, Maddie's cold, distant tone. Suddenly, it all made sense. The silence at dinner, the whispers behind closed doors, the disappointment when the doctor declared me healthy. I pressed the note against my chest, feeling my heart hammer beneath it. My body trembled not from age, not from weakness, but from rage. How had I reached this point? How had the family I sacrificed everything for become the very people plotting to erase me? That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak of the house set me on edge. Every gust of wind against the window made me flinch. I lay awake until the early hours, clutching that note, knowing one thing for certain: the people under this roof were no longer my family. They were my enemies. Asterisk, asterisk. It was well past 2 in the morning when I finally heard them. Muffled voices floated through the old walls of the house, faint but insistent, like the hum of bees inside a hive. I held my breath and slid out of bed, bare feet pressing into the cool hardwood floor. Every board creaked as though warning me to turn back, but I kept going. One hand braced against the wallpapered hall. The voices grew sharper as I neared the kitchen. I crouched near the doorframe, the glow of the overhead lights spilling across the linoleum like a stage. "The damn doctor wouldn't cooperate," Leila hissed, her tone dripping with venom. I told him she leaves the stove on, forgets names, even wanders at night. He still insisted she's perfectly fine. Grant's voice followed, low and weary. "Relax. If Ruiz won't do it, we'll find another doctor. Someone willing to sign the papers we need." My stomach knotted. Papers, nursing homes. They were speaking of me as though I weren't alive, as though I were some property to be transferred. And what about me? Maddie's voice cut in sharper than I had ever heard it. "I already put down a deposit for college housing. I need that money now, not 5 years from now, when she finally dies of old age." A chill swept over me. My sweet granddaughter, my shadow, now sounded like a stranger. "Olivia, don't talk like that." Grant scolded half-heartedly, but his voice lacked conviction. Then, after a pause, "She has a point. The house alone is worth $500,000. Add her pension, her savings, we could live comfortably for years. And why should we wait?" Lila snapped. "I didn't marry into this family to spend the rest of my life babysitting a senile old woman. She's a burden, always has been." Her words sliced through me like glass. A burden, after decades of sacrifice, after every sleepless night, every dollar stretched thin. This was what I was to them. "Tomorrow I'll speak with a lawyer," Grant muttered. "Maybe there's a way to have her declared incompetent without medical certification. And if that doesn't work," Leila added coldly, "we'll make her life hell until she begs to leave. Hide the TV remote, stop cooking for her, let her feel useless. She fold." Maddie let out a laugh that chilled me. "Or we could just help things along. Switch her medications, make her forget what day it is. In a month, no one will question she's lost her mind." I bit down on my knuckle to keep from crying out. My knees trembled, the wallpaper cool against my back as I pressed into the shadows. They weren't just conspiring to steal my money. They wanted to dismantle me piece by piece, to erase my dignity until there was nothing left. And as their laughter filled the kitchen, cruel, confident, victorious, I realized with a crushing certainty they had already decided my fate. Asterisk asterisk. By the time their footsteps faded and the kitchen light clicked off, I was still frozen in the hallway, shaking like a leaf caught in a storm. Their laughter echoed in my ears long after silence returned to the house. My own son, my daughter-in-law, even Maddie, the three people I had loved most in this world, plotting to break me piece by piece until I no longer recognized myself. I stumbled back to my room and collapsed into the armchair by the window. The moonlight filtered through the magnolia branches outside, silvering the floorboards. My chest tightened, my breath shallow. For the first time in my life, I felt truly cornered, trapped in my own home, stripped of trust, stripped of safety. Tears blurred my vision until I could barely see the old oak dresser across the room. And then, through that blur, my gaze landed on something I hadn't touched in years, a small leather notebook, its spine worn, tucked into the corner of the drawer. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside, in my late husband Thomas's steady handwriting, was a note I had nearly forgotten. Evelyn, if kindness is ever used against you, remember this. Our years together weren't just memories. I built protections for you. Not everything is in plain sight. Look in the back of the study safe. My heart jolted. The study safe, of course. I crept across the house like a thief in my own home, every creak of the stairs making my pulse race. In the study, I knelt before the safe and turned the dial with muscle memory I hadn't used in over a decade. It clicked open, and there, beneath old tax files and yellowed insurance forms, I found a sealed envelope. Inside were documents, bank account numbers, property deeds, even a small brass key. My breath caught as I scanned the papers. Offshore accounts totaling more than $2 million, 3 properties in Savannah, quietly purchased under a trust, investments Thomas had made quietly, never once hinting at their scale. My tears turned from despair to something sharper: fury, yes, but also resolve. They thought I was powerless. They thought my worth was tied only to what they could see. The house, the pension, the savings they tried to pry from me. They had no idea what I truly held. For the first time in days, I felt the fog of helplessness lift. I was not trapped. I was not broken. They had underestimated me, and in that mistake lay my salvation. I pressed the brass key into my palm, its edges biting into my skin like a reminder. I was not done. Not yet. They believed they had woken a senile old woman, but what they had really done was awaken a survivor with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. If I stayed under this roof, I would become their prisoner, whether in body, mind, or both. They had already rehearsed the story: the forgetful old woman, the burden, the liability. All they needed was time. If I gave them another week, maybe even another day, it might be too late. So I moved quickly, silently. I pulled my smallest suitcase from the closet, the same one I once used for weekend trips with Thomas. Into it went the essentials: my passport, a few changes of clothes, my medications, and the leather notebook with every account number and deed. Finally, I tucked Dr. Ruiz's note inside the lining, like a talisman reminding me of the truth I could no longer ignore. At 5 a.m., the house was still. The air carried the faint smell of last night's coffee, cold and bitter. I wrote a single line on the kitchen notepad before slipping out the back door: gone to run some errands. The taxi driver barely glanced at me when I climbed in, my suitcase rattling against the curb. As the house shrank in the rearview mirror, a wave of fear and exhilaration coursed through me. For the first time in years, I wasn't moving for them, I was moving for me. My first stop was the bank. There, behind thick glass and marble counters, I withdrew a modest amount of cash, just enough to buy myself breathing room. The teller gave me a curious look, but I smiled politely, projecting calm. Inside, my pulse thundered. Next, I checked into a boutique inn on the quieter side of Charleston's historic district. My alias was simple: my maiden name, Evelyn Shaw. The receptionist didn't bat an eye, handing me a brass key to a room that smelled faintly of cedar and safety. But I knew hiding wasn't enough. I needed power. I needed proof. And I needed allies who understood the law better than I ever could. That's when I called her. Simone Delaney, Charleston's fiercest elder law attorney, a woman whose reputation for dismantling predators in court was legend. When I explained carefully, trembling at first, what had happened, she didn't dismiss me or sugarcoat it. She listened. Then, she said, "Mrs. Hart, what they are planning is not just cruel, it's criminal, and we will not let them win." Simone introduced me to Cole Whitaker, a private investigator with the quiet confidence of someone who had once worked in federal law enforcement. His handshake was firm, his eyes steady. If they're already plotting, they'll trip over their own arrogance, he told me. My job is to catch them in the act. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight shift. I was no longer the hunted. With Simone and Cole by my side, the balance of power had begun to tilt. They thought they were closing the walls around me, but I was already building my escapement, my revenge. The plan was Simone's idea, executed with Cole's precision. They're desperate, Simone explained, her pen tapping against a legal pad. If they believe you're slipping away, they'll rush to act. And real estate leaves a trail. That's where we'll catch them. 2 days later, I walked into Richardson & Co., Charleston's most prestigious real estate office, dressed in a tailored black dress, Thomas once said, made me look regal. My hands trembled slightly as I smoothed the fabric, but my chin stayed high. Beside me, Simone carried a briefcase stuffed with legal documents. Cole lingered near the reception desk, pretending to skim a brochure, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. Mrs. Shaw, the agent greeted, using the maiden name on my booking. You're here to view properties. Yes, I replied smoothly, my voice steadier than I felt. Something quiet, secure, perhaps over $1 million. The words tasted strange in my mouth, like a language I hadn't spoken in years, but they were batoned within minutes. It worked. From the glass lobby, I heard voices I knew all too well. Grant's deep baritone, Leela's rehearsed sweetness, Maddie's nervous lilt. My stomach lurched, but I forced myself to remain calm. As they stepped through the revolving door, dressed in their finest clothes, we're here to begin the process of selling our mother's house, Grant announced confidently to another agent. She's not well. We have the authority to act on her behalf. I felt Simone's hand squeeze my arm lightly. Wait. The agent frowned. Do you have documentation of this guardianship? It's being processed, Leela interjected quickly. But time is of the essence. We just need to start the appraisal. That was my cue. I rose from the velvet chair in the lobby, heels clicking against the polished floor, and said clearly, interesting, because I don't recall granting anyone authority to sell my home. All three of them froze. Grant's face drained of color, Leela's mouth fell open, and Maddie actually took a step back. The entire office turned to stare, curiosity buzzing through the air. Mom, what are you doing here? Grant stammered. The same thing you are, I replied evenly. Handling real estate, except I'm buying, not stealing. Lila tried to recover, her voice trembling. She's confused. She hasn't been herself confused. I interrupted, my voice rising just enough to echo through the marble lobby. Confused is not withdrawing cash from my accounts. Confused is not hiding medical papers behind magazines. Confused is not plotting to forge my signature. The silence that followed was deafening. Every agent, every client in the office had stopped to listen. I could see the disapproval in their eyes, the shock, the disgust. Cole stepped forward, recording device in hand. Simone opened her briefcase with deliberate calm. Unless you'd like to provide your so-called legal documents right now, Simone said crisply, I'd suggest you stop talking, because from this moment forward, every word you speak is evidence. Grant's jaw clenched, Leela's face crumpled, Maddie's eyes darted between them, panic rising, and I stood there, tall and unbroken, realizing something vital. For the first time, the masks they wore had cracked in public, and there was no going back. The fallout from Richardson & Co. spread like wildfire. Word of my public confrontation traveled faster than I could have imagined. Neighbors whispered, colleagues from my teaching years sent me messages, and even the church ladies who once pitied my widowhood now looked at me with sharp, knowing eyes. My family's carefully curated facade was cracking. But what came next was beyond even Simone's predictions. 3 days after the real estate office debacle, Cole arrived at the inn where I was staying, his expression graver than usual. He carried a slim folder under his arm, the kind he never produced unless something big had landed. You were right, he said simply, setting the folder on the table between us. Grant and Leela weren't just bluffing with paperwork. They'd been working with a forger. Name's Parker Voss. I frowned. The name meant nothing to me, and Cole leaned back, his eyes narrowing. And Voss isn't just some small-time crook. He's been on the FBI's radar for months. Document fraud, forged medical histories, counterfeit wills, you name it. He's part of a larger network. My breath caught. The FBI, exactly. Simone, who had joined us that morning, tapped her pen against the folder. That means your son and daughter-in-law haven't just dipped into fraud, they've tied themselves to federal crime. Which means, we let the feds do what they do. Bess Cole opened the folder, revealing surveillance photos, grainy images of Grant sitting across from Voss in a dingy diner, sliding an envelope across the table. Another shot of Leela standing beside Voss outside a strip mall office, her face tense, clutching a manila folder. My stomach twisted. That's them. No denying it. They paid him $50,000 as a retainer, Cole continued. Money skimmed from your accounts with those credit cards Leela opened in your name. The FBI has already intercepted a portion of the transaction. Voss is cooperating. He's an informant. The room tilted. You mean? Yes, Simone said firmly, her eyes blazing with a mix of triumph and caution. Every word, every payment, every forged document they attempted that's already on record with federal authorities. I pressed my hands to my face, a sob escaping before I could stop it. Not because I pitied them, but because the enormity of their betrayal was now undeniable. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't exaggeration. It was conspiracy. They thought they were so clever, I whispered. Plotting in my kitchen, laughing in the dark. But they were already walking into the government's net, Cole nodded. And that net is closing fast. What we need to decide now is how visible you want to be when it does. Do you want to confront them head on, or let the FBI knock on their door first? I straightened slowly, the weight in my chest transforming into something sharper, harder. They wanted to erase me, I said, my voice steady. But now, I'll be the one who makes sure the world knows exactly who they are. And for the first time, I almost felt grateful that their greed had led them into hands far more merciless than mine. It was late afternoon when I heard the timid knock on my inn door. I half expected it to be Simone or Cole with another folder of evidence, but when I opened it, my heart clenched. Maddie stood there. Her eyes were swollen from crying, mascara smudged into dark half-moons beneath them. She wasn't the polished, distant teenager who had avoided my gaze at the dinner table. She looked like a child again, lost, fragile, terrified. Grandma, can I come in? Her voice cracked. I hesitated, fear and hope warring inside me. Then I stepped aside. She entered slowly, her arms wrapped around herself, as though holding her body together. For a long moment, silence stretched between us. Finally, she whispered, I know what they're planning, and I can't do it anymore. My chest tightened. Maddie, tears spilled down her cheeks. They told me you'd never believe me, that you'd think I was just lying to protect myself. But it's true, everything. The papers, the credit cards, the pills. They've been planning it for months. Her voice broke, and she dug into her backpack, pulling out her phone. With trembling fingers, she opened a folder of voice memos. I started recording their fights, she said, staring at the floor. I was scared they'd turn on me if things went wrong. Last week, Dad said if the FBI ever got close, they'd blame me. Said they'd tell everyone I stole your jewelry to pay for drugs. Her lips curled with disgust. I don't even use drugs, Grandma, but they thought it would sound believable. I felt my knees weaken and sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. My granddaughter, my Maddie, wasn't just a pawn in their scheme. She was their insurance policy, their scapegoat. I have proof, she said urgently, scrolling through messages on her phone. Text chains between Leela and Grant lit the screen about switching meds, about accelerating the process, about making her think she's losing it. I covered my mouth, fighting back a cry. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice hoarse. She lifted her tear-streaked face to mine. Because last night, I realized, if I keep silent, I'll become them. And I don't want that. I don't want to hate you. I don't want to destroy you. I want out. And I thought maybe, if I help you, you'd help me too. My heart ached at her words. I reached out and took her shaking hands in mine. Maddie, I whispered, you don't need to beg for my help. You're my blood. If you stand with me in truth, then you'll never stand alone. Her sobs broke into my chest as she clung to me. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sliver of light pierce the darkness. Because now, I wasn't fighting this war alone. I had an ally, one they never saw coming. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and coffee, its marble floors echoing. Every nervous step, reporters clustered outside the entrance, their cameras flashing as I walked in beside Simone, Maddie close at my side. She held her head high, though her hand trembled in mine. For weeks she had been my fragile ally, but today, she carried herself like someone older, stronger, a young woman, determined to tell the truth. Grant and Leela sat at the defense table, pale and drawn. Grant's once confident shoulders slumped forward, his jaw clenched tight. Lila dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, though no tears fell. They avoided my gaze, as if even meeting my eyes would expose the rot inside them. The prosecution laid out the case, piece by piece: fraudulent credit cards, unauthorized withdrawals, recordings of late-night conspiracies, and the attempted contract with Parker Voss, now in federal custody. Each piece of evidence struck like a hammer blow, and I watched as the jury's expressions hardened, disgust plain on their faces. But the moment that silenced the courtroom came when Maddie took the stand. Her voice wavered at first, but steadied, as she described nights she overheard her parents plotting, how they laughed about switching my pills, how they debated how long it would take to break me. She read aloud the text messages, her voice shaking only when she recounted their plan to use her as the scapegoat. They said they'd tell everyone I stole jewelry for drugs, she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. They were willing to ruin me, just to save themselves. The courtroom was still. Even the judge leaned forward, his eyes heavy with the weight of her words. When it was my turn, I rose slowly, leaning on the polished oak rail for balance. For 40 years, I gave everything I had to my family, I said, my voice steady though my hands trembled, and in return, they planned to erase me, not just to take my home or my money, but to destroy my mind, my dignity, my very name. That is not family, that is cruelty. I looked directly at Grant then, and for the first time, he dropped his eyes. The jury deliberated less than 3 hours. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous: guilty on all counts: fraud, conspiracy, elder abuse. Grant was sentenced to 12 years, Lila 10. As the gavel fell, I felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. Justice had been served, but it came at the cost of burying the illusion I had clung to for decades, that love alone was enough to hold a family together. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed again, but I didn't shy away this time. I held Maddie's hand and spoke into the microphones. Family is not defined by blood. It is defined by respect, loyalty, and love freely given. Sometimes the bravest act is protecting yourself from those who share your name. If you are watching this and feel trapped, know this: you are not alone. Speak up, stand tall, because dignity is worth fighting for. And for the first time in years, I felt free.